Hey there, Internet. Welcome to the Hard On Gear channel, where I discuss and review my used and abused knives and gear. So why in the world would you want to carry a big, scary, aggressive fixed blade when we've got these cool little things called folding knives? And even something like the Pacific Salt 2 here is pretty big for a folding knife when you've got cool little things like the Delica, the little version of that knife. Even saw some smaller mid-sized knives like the M16. Heck, you can even get away carrying like most people do a Swiss Army knife with a little tiny knife like this, and you can probably still do most of the things you're gonna have to do in the run of a day or a week or a month without ever needing something like that or something like a fixed blade. But there's a lot of benefits that come to carrying a fixed blade and a few cons, so I'm just going to quickly go over 4 pros and 4 cons to carrying a fixed blade. And if you know me and this channel at all, you'll know that I'm pretty much always carrying both. I like to EDC a fixed blade pretty much every day, no matter what I'm carrying, with the exception of maybe if I'm doing like going for a run or doing anything in like just PT shorts, or gym shorts. I'm starting to change my vocabulary. So if you end up finding this a little bit irrelevant because you live in the city or you live in a place where there's a law against carrying fixed blades, stick with me. I'm going to cover that in the video, and if there are any topics or any pros and cons that I miss in this video, feel free to comment below and let me know. So first off, I'll say that EDCing a fixed blade generally means something that you're going to be carrying on your person that's kind of a smaller knife. The Azula 2, quite a few different tops knives fit in that category. Some larger or medium-sized knives getting in the 4-inch and larger blade category start to get on the edge where you have to kind of carry it on your hip. The Toray Anaconda's got a lot of different carry options, but the Condor Pterosaur, which is a very similar knife to these Mora knives, but as well as the Mora Cansbull and the Mora Garberg, hip carry fixed blades that are pretty handy in the bush, and you can do almost anything you need to do with a knife with these knives. But they're a little bit large, a little bit annoying to carry, and if you're not carrying, or if you're not wearing something with a belt, then you're kind of screwed as far as your typical carry options. And I'm putting that in the wrong color sheet. Apparently, I'm colorblind. Black sheath, black knife. Green sheath, green knife. So these are an option. Your Buck 119 are probably one of the more common, larger fixed blades that people carry. Your very traditional style buck knife for some of your parents or grandparents, uncles, or maybe some of you younger lads who are into carrying some larger fixed blades on your hip. So we'll take these kind of off to the side here, because for the most part, I'm talking about things that you can carry on your person that are relatively a little more unnoticeable. And not that you want to always be concealing, because I know in Canada and in different states, cities, towns, and different districts, there are laws and regulations around concealing knives or concealing anything that can be considered a weapon. And I do believe, for the most part, in Canada's laws, it's interpreted that if you are concealing this knife, it's going to be interpreted as a concealed weapon. So you got to be careful how you carry things. So if you go around neck knifing and doing something else where, let's say, it's a little bit concealed until you go to draw it, you might catch somebody off guard when you reach up your shirt and end up pulling out a 3-inch fixed blade. Same goes for appendix carry and scout carry. I'm a big fan of appendix carry. I've been appendix carrying for a couple of years. It's my favorite place to carry smaller fixed blades, so long as it's small enough that it doesn't really get in the way of bending over to tie your shoes or getting in and out of vehicles. Something like the Tops Mill Spy Elite's a little too large. It's kind of on the edge for scout carry as well, but you can get away carrying a slightly larger knife. Even a larger knife, like a 5 or 6 inch. I got buddies who carry like 5 or 6 inch knives on their back. They don't seem to mind too much, but I know the amount of driving I've done, it's a bit aggressive for me. But fixed blades. Okay, so pro number 1, definitely stronger and more reliable than your average folder. Folders are awesome. They're super compact. You can slide them in your pocket and probably take up half the space, especially once you talk about the sheath, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But without a doubt, more reliable, more trustworthy, more likely that you're going to still have it if you only had this knife for years and you needed it to perform in a situation where, let's say, your life depended on it. Maybe a locking system fails on a folder, maybe the blade's rusted, maybe the whole thing hasn't been opened in a while and the pivot's been seized up. There's a million things that can go wrong with folders because of little mechanical things that are going on in some of them, depending on the locking system. Some are more complicated than others. Some jam up easier than others. But with a fixed blade, so long as you can get it out of the sheath, which, unless it's super rusted in there, you shouldn't have an issue getting it out. You can pretty much take it out and go to work. Something like a Scorpion lock or a Triad lock cold steel knife, you're probably going to be able to baton and twist and pry and do a lot of stuff that you can't do with something, say, a little bit more delicate like a Spyderco Pacific Salt 2, which doesn't have any steel liners. It's still plenty strong, but it's not a knife that's made for twisting and prying and that kind of stuff. So Some folders have the tolerance to get away with it. Some, like my M4, wow, that was loud. Some, like my M4 Benchmade Freak, I could probably do it, but I don't want to because it's such a nice knife that why would you want to risk it when you can use basically a pry bar like a piece of 1095 steel tops knife and do most of that stuff, which I'm not condoning the prying or twisting or doing any of that stuff with your fixed blades. But sometimes if you have it and you got to do it, it's good to have something like the Uzula 2, which I can do all sorts of prying, twisting, scraping, and to be honest, I don't end up doing a ton of cutting with this because I usually have a folder with me to do more of the slicey, dicey work if I need to open packages, slice up cardboard, or do anything like that. There's been times where I've been in the woods, didn't have a saw, didn't even have a Leatherman or something that I could, say, get rid of some small branches, or hypothetically, you could chop down like a fairly decent sized tree just by taking a stick or something and using it against the back of the knife and just, you know, slowly chipping through it one little wedge at a time. So you can do it with folders. A lot of folders, like I said, more than others, but definitely better off going with the fixed blade. Third pro, limited maintenance. So unless you have something carbon steel, which a fair amount of fixed blades, especially mine, are going to be carbon steel, which means they have a very low chromium content. They're going to be extremely tough, dense, have good edge retention. But if you do not oil them and you get them at all wet or damp and leave them in the sheath, they will rust. And this Uzula 2 is not looking too bad right now, but it's definitely had its times where it's had more brown on the edge than nice, shiny, relatively sharp edge. Let's see what we're looking at here. Yeah, okay. Try to keep them relatively touched up. But the Garberg has got a really nice DLC coating on it. As you can see, it's a little bit beat up, a little bit worn down. I don't see a ton of rust, or any really in any small spots where the coating's gone, but as this starts to get more beat up, I'm gonna have to remember to put oil on this. The Stanvik steel, a little bit of rust, stainless but not super stainless, so just keep an eye on that. Really with the fixed blades, as long as they're sharp and they have some kind of an oil on them, if they're not stainless, you're pretty much good to go. Same thing with the blade maintenance. You have to do the same with the folders, although most of them are stainless steel, so you're a little bit better off most of the time as far as if you forget to oil them. But the pivots and the inside areas of the knives do have to be clean. Some people just use air compressor, some people use little compressed air cans, some people will soak their knives, then re-lubricate them afterwards. A million different ways to clean them. I did a little video on how I go through maintaining my knives. Pretty simple, low maintenance. I'm not super picky about making my knives look factory ready and any of that, so check that out if you want a little bit more information on that. But fixed blade wise, not a lot you have to do. Keep them oiled, keep them sharp, maybe touch the sheath up once in a while, but you can see I'm not really too into going into the nitty gritty work of making sure my fixed blades are super clean. Last pro, they're easier and faster to deploy almost across the board, unless they've got some kind of a dual latching system or like an extra button or buckle on them. Fixed blades are normally going to come right out of the sheath, 1 second. If you ever catch yourself in a situation like, I don't know, let's say you were attacked by something and you had to pull your knife out, there's a lot of opportunity in a stressful moment to fumble and not deploy the folding knife that you're going to try and pull out of your pocket, hopefully not drop, and then deploy, and then hopefully go to work with. All that takes time and fine motor skills that you might not have in the moment. So being able to pull from the sheath and basically do whatever you have to do with it. Same goes if you ever had to cut a seatbelt, if your car went over a guardrail into the water. A million different things where you might need it. Even just say if you're working and you're on a ladder. Metal Complex uses this analogy all the time, and it really makes a lot of sense. If you're on a ladder and you've got one hand tied up or one hand on the ladder and you want to deploy your knife. Some knives are easier than others to deploy with one hand as far as folding knives go, but fixed blades, generally speaking, so long as the sheath can be so long as the knife can be resheathed easily, it's pretty easy to pull with one hand, resheath, go back to work. Now, time for the cons. So, number one con, first one that just come to mind, which is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but legitimately a problem for a lot of people, is that they're scary. Geographical area kind of matters too, depending on your state, country, if you're in the city or the country, all that stuff. Generally speaking, fixed blades have a bit more of a bad rap than most folders, not including like butterfly knives and push button automatics and out the front, like, switch blades and stuff like that. But even definitely something like the Tor Anaconda, which looks tactical, and if you wheel it out and start doing a bunch of spinny stuff and stab in the air, you're gonna make people very uncomfortable. But if you pull this out, cut open a letter, put it back in the sheath, not so bad. Context really makes a big difference and how you go about it. If I haul one of these knives out and start stabbing into a box to cut it open, you look like an idiot. You're going to draw bad attention to yourself no matter what kind of knife you're using. But even something like the Uzula, if I haul this out in, say, just a regular urban setting like grocery store, bank, whatever, I got to be careful what I'm doing, because if I do it around a cop or someone, they just tend to get a little more uneasy around somebody carrying a fixed blade on their hip in everyday life. Depends on where you're at, what you can get away with. But generally speaking, fixed blades tend to be a little bit more intimidating and have a little bit worse rap as far as being weapons with the public. Con number 2, they are less compact. So this folding knife here folds. It is much smaller. The 8015 here from Cold Steel, if I can remember the name, is a pretty big knife. When it's fully extended, it's I think 8 inches. No, sorry, about 9 inches, because I believe the code for... No, that should be right, about 8 inches, 8.5 maybe. Pretty big knife, not as big as some of the larger fixed blades that I carry a lot of the time. But look at this. Even for a big thick knife like that, all of a sudden becomes relatively pocketable. And while it's big and thick, it does go in the pocket, does disappear. Something like the Pacific Sol 2, lots of blade, lots of knife, slips into even a pair of gym shorts with relative ease. Again, the pros and cons we talked about as far as like already with the fixed blades, a little bit more flimsy. There's a lot of cons that come to the folding knife. However, more convenient, easier to carry. If you're wearing sweatpants or gym shorts, something without a belt, this is pretty much going to slip it anywhere. You could even slip it in your belt line if you didn't want to have it like in your pocket. There's lots of different ways to do it. Little Fit Devil, which hilarious name for a knife channel. I'm sure the algorithm has thrown her up towards you if you've ever YouTubed the knife video and you're a dude. But she does lots of crazy carry option videos for girls who do, wearing like very limited clothing, and you can pretty much slip a pocket clip folding knife in just about any place you could almost imagine. And the next con. They're illegal in some places. Depending on your country, state, city, there could be a bylaw that says no fixed blades within city limits. There might be a country where you're not allowed to carry a fixed blade unless you're hunting or doing something where the context is so clear that you're not carrying that for self-defense or to harm another person. And some countries you're allowed to carry anything for self-defense. Sometimes you're allowed to carry a full-blown sword on your back, Texas. And some countries like Canada, nothing on your person can be considered a weapon. Technically, I could carry a crossbow walking around the street, so long as I was walking to my hunting location and didn't have a vehicle or a better route to go. Like, you can get away with a lot, so long as you have a good reason. With knives, you could carry, again, technically a sword, if you had a legitimate reason to do so. It wasn't considered a threat, and law enforcement didn't think you were just some jackass walking around the street with a 6-foot piece of steel on your back. But it is something to consider depending on where you're at, and if you're even traveling to a different location to hunt or visit family or whatever. Sometimes the knives that you're used to carrying will be illegal in the state you're going to, much like concealed carry pistols. In some states, you're good to go, and in some states, you are a full-blown federal criminal and you'll be going to prison. All right, and the last con, with most folding knives, even if they don't have a pocket clip, something like a Swiss Army knife or a mini multi-tool like the Leatherman PS4, you can slide it in your pocket and you can carry it fairly easily. If you want to carry a folding knife, pocket clips, or even something like a larger multi-tool, pocket clips make it super easy and convenient. You need a sheath with a fixed blade. It's kind of the fun part for a lot of us, because I like to mess around with different fixed blade carry options, and there's a whole long video about that if you want to go through pretty much every different way that you can carry a fixed blade knife. Check that one out. But right here we have one of my favorite ways to do it, which is a nice easy slide-on clip, the spring steel clip from the SE Survival mounting kit. One of the better options, because you don't have to weave it through your belt. It's super easy to slide on and off. You can change the orientation for scout appendix or or vertical hip carry. The top sheaths as well with their clips okay, but as you can see, it does tend to open up after a while, and if the belt doesn't quite fit in here as well as others, it doesn't quite retain as well as that SE Azula clip or the SE clips in general. Knives like this with the clamshell Kydex sheaths, they tend to be one of the more versatile mounting options, because you've got many little holes here that you can throw paracord or different screw mounting options, ulti clips, tech locks, tons of different stuff. These tend to be the way to go if you want to get custom Kydex sheaths done for pretty much any knife. Then your mounting options get pretty much limitless. Dangle carries, even more annoying. There's some knives that I'll tend to carry. I'll leave them on my work pants or whatever for a couple days, and that's whatever, not as bad. If it's a knife that goes on my kit, like fire kit or something like that on my old job, or if it was getting mounted on a piece of kit here for work now that I'm kind of going through my training in the military. If it's going to stay there for 6 months, not a big issue having the sheath there. There are issues with sheaths as far as retention. So I've had Azula sheaths that have lost retention over time. This Mora, I would never carry this Garberg upside down, because the retention in this sheath, isn't quite good. I'm careful I don't stab myself in the hand doing that. But it's losing retention over time. Many sheaths have these issues. You can always order new sheaths, but it is a pain in the butt. There's not a lot of times that a pocket clip totally fails on you. You can keep a knife for 20 years and probably still have the same pocket clip. Sometimes some of these more modern sheaths and even some leather ones tend to wear down too much and you do have to replace them. So, but that's the last con, and if there's any more that I'm not thinking of, I'm sure there's a bunch, but these are really the big ones that come to my mind. Feel free again to comment below. Tomorrow's Tuesday hog poll is going to have kind of the same topic line in there, so feel free to vote on that and let me know what you think in the comments. And this isn't supposed to be a fixed blades are better than folders. I did do a fixed blade versus folder way back the first few months of the channel, which was, I kind of beat around the bush more than I planned to with that one, but you can check that one out too if you want to go a little more in depth in the topic. But the big thing for me in this is that there's pros and cons to both, and I tend to carry both just to make sure I'm covered on all ends. And a lot of the time, like I said, I'm normally carrying a little bit of everything. Typical carry for me these days has been something like the M4 Freak, Missoula 2, and throw that Victorinox in my pocket. Pretty much any given day, you'll see me walking around with something like that. But if you're a fixed blade only kind of guy or a folder kind of gal or whatever you are, feel free to keep doing you. Just let me know what you're doing down in the comments, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching this, and it's the Hard On Gear channel signing off.